Well, good morning and welcome to the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City on our Ingathering Sunday, the kickoff to the church year. I am the Reverend Monica Dobbins, and together with my colleague, the Reverend Tom Goldsmith, I want to extend our warmest welcome back. If you're visiting with us today, please know that you are our honored guests. We want to get to know you and introduce ourselves. So we invite you to stop by the welcome table just right outside this door in Elliott Hall after worship and stay for coffee and conversation. It's a great time for a new beginning with this wonderful, busy, justice-driven church, and we want you to be a part of it. We begin our service with the lighting of the flaming chalice, joining with Unitarian Universalists all around the world who look to this symbol as a beacon of hope. With them, we resist evil and choose love, counting on the strength of our covenantal community to be the foundation of our hope and the source of our joy. Symbol of light, symbol of knowledge, symbol of warmth and of freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love. And now, let's celebrate this joyful day by rising together in body or in spirit to sing number 361.
We should try that every Sunday and just see who comes in, you know? Oh, it is wonderful to see you, to see all your shiny, bright, beautiful faces. Thank you for being here. You are so important to all of us here. You know why? You know why you're so important? Because you make this place a church. Because if it wasn't for you, we'd just be a senior citizen center. No, there are no children here, so we can just go on with what it is we want to do. But you turn this into a church, and we are so grateful because our work here as a congregation is to make the world a better place. And we are inspired to do that because of you. We really would like to change things in this world so that you have an easier time as you grow up and become adults. And so you are the reason that we have this mission in this church to work for justice and to make some real important changes. And it's amazing how quickly time goes. You know, in the blink of an eye, you are going to be sitting in the pews wondering, where are the children? Do we have any children here? And the children are going to come in, they're going to enter, they're going to rejoice, they're going to be seated, and you say, okay, this is a church because of the kids. And so we thank you. We also have some greetings from the Reverend Monica. Come on up.
Good morning. There is no happier Sunday for me than the Sunday when the whole church community finds its way, fits its way into this space, and we can all be together. Children, parents, grandparents, step-parents, step-grandparents, all together, reaffirming that this is a faith for all people, a faith that strengthens families of all kinds, a faith that transcends barriers. Welcome to each and every one of you. As I begin my second year among you, I am filled with optimism and excitement for the work that we are about to do together. Woohoo! The ministry staff of this church is strong, and we love and trust one another and support one another. The members of this church are courageous and loving, and the children and youth of this church are curious and convicted. These are vital elements of a lifelong learning community, and I'm honored to be a part of it. Now, I want to speak directly to our religious education students. Your ministers and religious educators have big plans for you. And can I confess that I am a little bit jealous? Some of you will be working on Bible literacy. Others will be visiting neighbors in faith at local temples, churches, and other houses of worship. Some will be finding Horcruxes and fighting Voldemort. What? We do that here? Some of you will be engaged in Our Whole Lives sexual education, where the curriculum goes so much deeper than sex ed. You'll be learning about healthy relationships, healthy boundaries, and how to love living in your own skin. And all of you, from the tiniest toddlers to young adults, will be stretching and growing and wrestling with the biggest questions facing us as people. May we who are adults commit to seeing these people as nothing less than full people, a little shorter and a little less experienced perhaps, but people in their fullness and members of our community who deserve love and respect just as they are. With this, I want to pass you over to our Director of Religious Education, my colleague and friend, Amanda Esko. She and our Religious Education Program Assistant, Lissa Lander, have been working all summer to get ready for this exciting year of religious education, and I am so grateful for the work that they've done. What a year it's going to be.
Welcome to another church year. My name is Amanda Esko, and as I was introduced, I am our new Director of Religious Education. I love this community. I have been a part of this community since 2003. I have made coffee, been at the welcome table, held babies, some of which are now in 9th and 10th grade, hosted dinners and brunches for families and youth, and put children in dragon costumes at the Christmas pageant. I have stood here at this pulpit in dedications and memorials. Now I stand here as our Director of Religious Education. Professionally, I have been an educator and school administrator in Tooele and Davis counties, as well as working with the Utah State Board of Education, writing policy and overseeing school improvement plans for 12 years. When asked last year, when I was working as one of our program assistants, working at First Church is really all of the blends of things that I am passionate about. I get to use my background knowledge running schools and classrooms. I get to devote my time to social justice projects with youth and community organizing with families. I spend my days working with amazing staff and volunteers to create classrooms and programs to inspire, educate, and minister to our youth and families. This is the job I have always wanted. This year in RE, as Reverend Monica said, we are doing some amazing things. We have classes that will be fighting horcruxes of injustice in our community, engaging in Bible literacy and world religions, studying the rituals and practices of our UU faith, spending the year with OWL, delving into social justice issues of identity, gender, race, immigration. Sitting in this sanctuary, you unfortunately don't often get the chance to see the good works of our youth and leaders. If you're ever lucky enough to have me come and ask you to participate in our religious education program, take me up on my offer. You will be blown away by this community of young thinkers and learners. I am incredibly grateful for all those around me who helped us prepare for this church year. As you'll often hear me say, there are no magic fairies. And the hours and hours spent preparing for this year is astounding. Thank you all, especially our program assistant, Lissa Lander, for your countless hours. Additionally, yay, Lissa! She deserves all the applause. You guys didn't see the teacher workroom this week. Additionally, I want to thank our teachers. Thank you for giving your time and talent to these young people surrounding you. Thank you for answering my emails. Thank you for creating a safe space for our youth to continue to develop their faith. Thank you for considering teaching our youth to be a valuable ministry within this congregation and not a chore. Your efforts week in and week out change lives and are not unnoticed. On this first day of religious education, I want to take a moment to dedicate and commission those among us who have chosen to take on this important responsibility of teaching religious education this year. As I ask questions of specific groups, please answer as you're willing and able. We do. This dedication was originally written by the Reverend Barbara Wells, and I adapted it to fit us here at First Church. At this time, I would invite all those here who are going to teach religious education to stand. Yeah. As they do, let me remind you that there is a whole other set of teachers who are working with our infants and preschoolers right now, and they're already in their classrooms, and we dedicate this to them as well. To you, as our teachers, let me say this. In taking on this responsibility, you have committed yourself to nurturing the spirits of the youth at First Church. Do you promise now, before them and this congregation, to do your best to honor them, teach them, and nurture their growth as Unitarian Universalists? Do you, the young people of the First Unitarian Church, promise to honor, respect, and nurture these teachers with your hearts and with your minds? We do. We're going to work on that. We're evolving, we're growing. Do you, as the parents and congregation of First Unitarian Church, promise these teachers and young people your support, knowing that religious faith cannot be taught only in a classroom, but must also be encouraged in the home and beyond? Take up the challenge of this good work, friends. May you have fun, grow, and learn together, and be a continuing example of the importance of religious education, both to us gathered here and the world beyond. Amen. Now I will ask our youth and their leaders to stand as the incomparable David Owens plays us out to Enter, Rejoice, and Go Out, not I Am a Unitarian, and have fun on your first day of classes. Thank you.
Thanks for leaving us hanging. I didn't know when I was supposed to come up here, you know. Good morning, everyone. I want to start the announcements by saying, I'm sure just about everybody here enjoys going to a good restaurant, right? Everybody enjoy a good restaurant? Okay. And the wisdom that accompanies being a patron of a restaurant that you really like is don't go look into the kitchen, right? Because once you see the kitchen of your favorite eating establishment, that's the way things are done. I didn't know about this place, and you can kind of just lose your appetite. And so that's really one of the important things to remember. Why am I saying this? Let me tell you. We kind of have the staff in this church kind of represent a kitchen. And we're cooking from Monday morning through Saturday night to prepare a meal. And we are a kitchen that has 5 full-time chefs and about half a dozen sous chefs that all come together and chop, chop, chop and work real hard and do things and shout profanities and but all for a good meal. During the summer, one of our chefs, Hal Gonzalez, resigned after 15 years, And that, of course, constituted a minor crisis, or actually not that minor. And so we were looking high and low for a new chef to come in. And what's so amazing is that we found, well, not only that we found a new chef, but we found one who actually is also a member of this church. And so she had the courage to come to church and look into the kitchen to see how things are prepared here. And she's been with us since August 6th, and she's still with us, despite the kitchen and all the scenes that are going on there. And so I want to mention that we are truly, truly very, very happy and honored that Carol Foster is our new chef serving as church administrator. And I just want her to introduce herself to all of you. Carol, come on up.
Thank you, Tom. Hi, my name is Carol Foster, and I am excited to be your new church administrator. I am a member of the church, along with my husband, Paul, and our two children, Victor, 14, and Kieran, 11, who are involved in our fantastic religious education programs. For the past 4 years, I've been working in office and personnel management for a local business downtown. Prior to that, we lived in Nottinghamshire, England for 7 years, where Paul is from. There, I worked as a mental health counselor, and Tom tells me that that is a good resource for any church administrator. In the past weeks, I've had opportunity to meet many of you and reacquaint myself with familiars in my new role here. I have been awed and inspired by the dedication of our leadership, staff, board, and volunteers, and I'm looking forward to meeting and getting to know everyone. I'm so grateful for your presence in our community. Thank you.
Isn't she wonderful? A couple of additional announcements. You can tell it's the start of a new church year by just how thick all these pages are for the announcements. I really do hope that you treat them seriously and take a look at all the various options that are really at our disposal here. Just a couple of highlights, and that is tomorrow night, Family Fun Night, a great occasion for families with young children. There's really no cutoff, maybe up to 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, something like that. Come, share a meal together with the kids, and then various programs follow. It's always a very joyous time. The young adults will kick off their group this Thursday night, and that's always a very important part of this church as well, just getting the young adults together. And you'll also note that kind of as an insert in the middle of all this is a sheet by our Refugee Resettlement Committee of ways in which you can help them. The Resettlement Committee here in this church is roughly 50 to 55 people strong. They've been doing this service for roughly 20 years. And this is just a way, kind of a guide to make their work a little bit easier in terms of accumulating things to help welcome refugees who settle here in Salt Lake City. So take a look, and it'll be appreciated by the committee very, very much, as well as the refugees. At this time, the offering will gratefully be received, a chance to greet one another and welcome each other back to First Unitarian. Well, after a long summer of neglecting our usual routines, venturing here and there, sampling this and that, I always find myself a little wary on in-gathering Sunday. Will the congregation indeed gather in once again? Or will they have been converted to the largest religious designation in the country, namely, I get my religion from a walk in the woods? Now, during the summer, we may well develop a lot of sympathy for that perspective. Yeah, that's kind of nice, getting your religion from a walk in the woods. The summer, I'm sure, for most of us here, if not all of us, included several walks in the woods, and it was kind of nice because there are no committee meetings and things that followed. So it's just a wonderful space for yourself. But eventually, we all seem to return to church, many having traveled much of the globe during the summer, and yet they find themselves back in this quaint little chapel in Salt Lake City. Like homing pigeons who will fly upwards of 1,000 miles through storms and wind to get back to where they belong, nobody really understands why. It's also a bit of a mystery why Unitarians, not known for their religiosity, nor hymn singing, nor common prayer, don't take it personally. Nobody knows really why Unitarians are drawn to a religious community and consciously, without the threat of hell or lure of heaven, wind their way back here to where they feel they belong. Now, our summers may have been refreshing, but perhaps what we have discovered from our walk in the woods is actually best shared with others. Perhaps the holy, the things that matter most in life, the holy does not reveal all its poignancy in solitude or silence. Sometimes it requires the clarity of another's voice, or even the buzz of a community, or maybe the warm touch of others who travel the same path as you. Perhaps we gather once again in this chapel where we feel we belong, because whatever it is we value, be it freedom, courage, love, can only be preserved and can only be transmitted with the help of an institution. You know, we may have a fine walk in the woods, even inspirational, but there's no heritage that gets passed down. No one person alone constitutes a tradition that, among many things, confronts injustice. We return to the place we feel we belong, perhaps because we are part of its history, and we feel empowered to carry that history into the future, and we hope to shape that history and give meaning through the values that are embodied right here in this institution. Now, there are times, surely, when I prefer to be alone. I have no quibble with explorations of the natural world, nor feeding my spirit with a walk in the woods. It's kind of nice to get away, but the bottom line is the problem with getting away is that we're getting away, removing ourselves from the cacophonous din called life. You know, I sometimes think about that familiar line of Jesus, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am. I always thought of that as kind of extreme narcissism, worthy, I think, of an anonymous op-ed warning the world that more rational minds prevail other than this narcissism at the center of everything. But you know, if we look carefully at what Jesus said, isn't he saying that although the holy can show its face to an individual, let's say walking the woods alone, that holiness may shine more brightly when we are in relationship with others. And thus, when we return to the ingathering, we know we arrive to where we belong because of our deeply connected relationships. Pema Chodron, an American Buddhist nun who teaches in Nova Scotia at the oldest Tibetan monastery in all of North America, presents a perfect metaphor for our misconstrued image of spiritual awakening requiring that proverbial trek up to the mountaintop. Now, we are at first drawn to that image because as we slowly make our way up, we leave our attachments and worldliness behind. And at the peak of the mountain, voila, we have transcended all pain. We're spiritually enlightened. There we are. But the problem with that metaphor, she reminds us, is that you leave it all behind. You leave all others behind. And their suffering continues, unrelieved by your personal escape. In contrast, the journey of the Bodhisattva, one who is enlightened, doesn't go up, but the journey is down, as though the mountain points to the earth instead of the sky. Instead of transcending the suffering of all creatures, we need to move towards the turbulence. We must move down and down and down with others. And then ultimately, awakened, what happens? We then hear the cries of the world. Pema Chodron writes, right down there in the thick of things, we discover the love that will not die. The awakened heart is the basic goodness of all beings. But this represents a kind of teaching that is really not that unique to Buddhism. I mean, the absence of any mention of the deity certainly appeals to Unitarians. But Judaism and Christianity likewise offer a stark contrast in their own metaphorical language, a stark contrast between solitude and hearing the cries of the world. Judaism and Christianity have their own stories about our responsibilities in the world, and stories that offer their own spin on discovering the love that will not die. And perhaps the stories are a little rich in theistic language, but I learned early on in divinity school that we should never let facts get in the way of a good story. Something we should remember. And there are some pretty good stories. Stories about the powerful in society and their total neglect of the powerless. And these stories are crystal clear about God siding with those on the underside of power, while those of privilege move away from the turbulence. And the story of slavery in Egypt, the exile into Babylon, The Hebrew prophet speaking of God's care for the most vulnerable. It's all about awakening to a love that knows no end. The prophet Amos took issue with the leaders of Israel who, and I quote from the prophet, the leaders trampled the head of the poor into the dust of earth and pushed the afflicted away. What an image. Trample the head of the poor into the dust of the earth and push the afflicted away. Wow. The Hebrew and Greek scriptures offer stories in graphic detail about finding the courage to awaken to the cries of the world. And Jesus made it abundantly clear in a multitude of stories that God identifies most with those who are hungry, thirsty, strangers, ill, and imprisoned. For as we treat them, he said, we treat God. And many Christians have conveniently forgotten that aspect. So if God sides with the poor, and we treat the poor miserably, we've treated God in an unthinkable way. And that's a pretty powerful argument to make, especially in these times, where the gospel of wealth erases any notion of equity between rich and poor. Those in power believe that God wants them to be in power, and so they care not a shred about the vulnerable whom they then trample into the dust. And God's name is invoked by the privileged few as though they were buddies. We need only listen to Mike Pence's sanctimonious diatribes to understand he's not going down into the thick of things. He's not about to witness how the poor are trampled in the dust. He doesn't see the stranger as someone to be loved like himself. In fact, he's making sure the stranger is tossed from the land rather than welcomed. The powerful live in such fear of losing their control that they have no concept of what love might actually look like. There's a new theologian at Harvard. I love discovering new theologians. I know, I feel like I've earned my gray hairs. I love that. His name is Jonathan Walton, and he's new on the faculty there, and I think he's made quite a splash. He offers this very radical perspective, a perspective on how to engage with the world by proposing that we see the world as God sees it. What a brilliant plan or scheme or vision that seems to be. He makes no apology for using God language or even making God seem like this concrete reality. But he says, no, forget all that. If you're hung up on that, it's too bad. Here's the point, that you look at the world as though you possessed divinity. You were part of the divine. Now, what do you see? Can you imagine? What might change if we try to see what God might see? What would that really mean to see as God sees? Here's an example from our new theologian friend. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, a certain Jewish man fell among thieves along a dangerous highway. We know this story. It was neither a well-pedigreed Judean nor a priest who stopped to provide assistance, but a Samaritan, a class of people considered inferior in Judea and Galilee. Jesus subverts conventional wisdom and places empathy in the eyes of the one who would otherwise be considered the stranger. The point was that the Samaritan could see as God sees. The Samaritan saw the victim through the lens of love. Intentional acts of care and compassion followed. First the lens of love, then the compassion follows. But we could even take that story a step further and relate the parable actually more personally. We can assume that the priest and the Levite were afraid for their own lives, since this stretch of highway was, at least a bit iffy. And so they undoubtedly asked themselves, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? This is how people see the world. The Good Samaritan, however, sees the world as how God sees it and reverses the question. If I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? What changes in this new way of seeing is that we realize that we don't only have the capacity to do what is right and show concern for our neighbor, but we have an obligation to do precisely that, whether we feel like it or not. Looking at the world through this lens of love. When we strengthen our love to identify with others and empathize with them, it's always easier to do right by them. When you love your neighbor as yourself, you will do right. When you love the stranger as yourself, for you too were strangers in Egypt, the empathy is obvious. Love and empathy together lead to justice. Or as Cornel West likes to frame it, justice is what love looks like in public. Isn't that a great line? Justice is what love looks like in public. My great source of pride in serving this congregation lies in its tradition of doing the work of building a utopian society. Do you ever think about it that way? This is what we do. We're trying to build utopia. And maybe that's why come May or June in the church year, we're so tired. We've been working on this utopia, despite our knowledge that it always lies beyond our grasp. Nonetheless, we're always moving towards the turbulence. We hear the cries of the world, and we are not afraid. Now, regardless of which story ignites our passion, or which metaphor steers us towards the path that goes down and not up, we are called to gather in once again, to awaken our hearts, and thus to experience the love that knows no end. We're called to gather in, once again, to find the strength of love. And that's an interesting phrase. Actually, it's attributed to the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who recognized that the pursuit of an ideal requires a very special kind of strength. And King called it the strength to love. Nothing is ever going to change in society unless we find the strength to love. We love him. Don't worry. We love him. This congregation takes religion, takes this mission, takes the vision, takes religion most seriously. It's not a pastime, but for us, it really is a spiritual discipline. I got to tell you, it's a funny story. Woody Allen once said, I read War and Peace in 20 minutes. It's about Russia. And that's how many folks treat religion, casually, quickly. Unitarianism sometimes gets the quick, casual sweep of a person who really doesn't get it. Because our church is not fundamentally about creedlessness. It's certainly not about believing anything you want. It's not about the liberty of the individual. These are all pastimes. Take it or leave it. Everyone in this church knows, and newcomers are quick to learn, that this congregation does not entertain a casual faith. We're in the business of building utopia. We're in the business of creating love and justice, intentional care and compassion, and trying on a new theological lens, trying to see the world as God sees it. Wow. What joy to reassemble at our ingathering. Here we are again. Here we go again. Here we strive again. May we find the courage to move towards the turbulence. May we find the wisdom to kindle our vision of a just world. And here, may we find the strength to love. So be it. May we close our service, turning our hymn books, please, to number 308. We extinguish this chalice. I would like to close with some very beautiful words, serve as a good reminder by Bill Schultz, who used to be president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. It's a very good way of making our convictions accessible. He writes, The blessings of life are available to everyone. The sacred or divine, the precious and profound are made evident not in the miraculous or supernatural, but in the simple and everyday. Human beings, joined in collaboration with the gifts of grace, are responsible for this planet and its future. Every one of us is held in creation's hand, a part of the interdependent cosmic web, and hence strangers need not be enemies. And finally, no one is saved. No one is saved until we all are saved, where all means the whole of creation. Amen.